What's going on, guys? I'm Tyler, and to continue my series of Studio Ghibli reviews, I'm here to let you know that Howl's Moving Castle is no perfect movie. And Howl's Moving Castle is about a young girl named Sophie, played by Emily Mortimer, who is cursed with the appearance and body of a 90-year-old woman voiced by Jean Simmons. And in order to cure herself of this curse, she sets out to find, and eventually does, discover the moving castle itself, operated by the mysterious but still charming wizard Howl, played by Christian Bale, his apprentice Markle, voiced by Josh Hutcherson, and the fire demon who physically runs the castle itself, Calcifer, played by Billy Crystal. And I'm just gonna flat out say this, in my opinion, has some of the best animation and sense of awe and wonder that Hayao Miyazaki has ever put on screen. I love how not necessarily brand new the setting is, but still very rare by Studio Ghibli movies. It kind of has a Kiki's Delivery Service or Porco Rosso feel to it, where they portray the Eastern European countryside, but in such a bright and colorful, vibrant way. This might actually be my favorite use of color in a Studio Ghibli movie, because whereas almost every mundane city or wide open countryside looks equally massive in scope and full of so many different colors in different shots that still stand out equally, whenever there's a war or battleship, the ships themselves are portrayed in dark gray or dark brown muted colors to make it clear that regardless of what side of the war you're fighting on, you're still inflicting violence and pain to thousands of innocent lives, including the moving castle itself, considering it's Howl's home and he's using it not all the time, but in a sense as a soldier for the war. So it definitely has that feature to it. And speaking of the moving castle itself, it is really good to look at. It's definitely computer generated, but it still has a two-dimensional look to it. It moves at a fluid pace just like all the other hand-drawn elements. And the steampunk design where it has a slug eyes and mouth, kind of so Calcifer can see any nearby towns so that you don't step on it. And not to mention that, the moving castle itself is moving with these chicken legs. And also, the slug mouth itself, someone can actually fly in as a much more subtle way as opposed to exposing the portals that they have all around the kingdom. It's well thought out, and it's really well designed in such a surreal but original way. And I'm not entirely sure if this was Hayao Miyazaki or Diana Wynne Jones' doing, because she's the one who wrote the original novel, but the magical elements in this movie are some of my absolute favorite. They give you this sense of whimsy and wonder and awe that really make you feel like you're a kid again, especially whenever Markle is seeing something magical for the very first time. His reactions are so amazed that it really puts you in that childlike mentality. Seeing Howl and Sophie walking on air or using a war machine disguising themselves invisibly, it's also creative and inventive. It serves the story so nicely, and it's just such a marvel to look at with the cinematography and the POV shots that they come up with to make it feel like you're really along with them on the ride. And it definitely helps that the characters themselves are incredibly likable. Some of Ghibli's best, if I'm being completely honest. Emily Mortimer is really good at portraying a shy and insecure young woman, and her lack of screen time makes you appreciate her younger self a lot more. But it really is Jean Simmons who shines as older Sophie. She does have the exact same personality traits and memories of younger Sophie, but now that she's an old woman, now that she's the only one who really understands what she's going through because she can't tell anyone about this curse as per the curse's rules, she keeps talking out loud to herself about what a shitty situation she's in, and it gives her the opportunity to speak more freely and vocally about herself. And along the journey throughout this movie, she discovers the amount of bravery and self-confidence and the ability to make decisions on the behalf of other people out of pure love. All of these qualities she never knew that she had, and that's what makes her such a likable character. She also has a Porco Rosso quality to her where she might actually see her curse as more of a blessing, and quite possibly the curse might disappear all in all if she let it. It's really hard to explain, but it is a Beauty and the Beast scenario where you spend so much time with the Beast, you really get to grow and appreciate them as a character, that when you see the younger self, it is still well earned. It's Beauty and the Beast without being disappointed by the transformation at the very end. And I gotta say, Christian Bale is incredibly nuanced in his voiceover performance. A lot of whispering and slow talking to serve just how mysterious he is in terms of his personality and intentions. For those reasons, sometimes it takes a little bit of getting used to just to know that it is Christian Bale, because you expect him to be a much more loud and upfront character. But the contrast of his performance and character as opposed to his usual filmography really stands out, and he's so much more charismatic than he is in some other roles that it's a lot easier to forgive. Billy Crystal as Calcifer, I feel like Billy Crystal might be the only actor who could have played Calcifer, because he's one of the few comedians who can act very self-centered but still likable, and I think it's his high-pitched, very fast-paced line delivery that makes up for the fact that, again, his voice doesn't really fit the design. In fact, his voice doesn't even fit the lip movements, because usually Disney and Miramax are really good at matching those dubs, but his personality really comes out. It really fits the character personality that you can get used to it after a while. Same with Josh Hutcherson as Markle, one of my favorite characters. I love how bright and colorful his design is. It actually does make him adorable. I like the bond that he has between him and older Sophie that does really feel like a grandma-grandson relationship, especially with the way that once she enters Howl's life, Markle can accept less of Howl's responsibilities every time he runs away, and he can just soak in how much fun it is to be a child in the amount of time that you still have. I would have liked Markle and Howl to have a defined relationship, considering he is Howl's apprentice. You'd think he'd know at least a little bit more magic than he does, but weirdly enough, Howl only addresses him in one scene, and that's the first scene that you see the two of them together. And later on in the movie, when Howl looks at Sophie and says, "I have something to lose, and that's you." That's a great thing to say. It's good that you didn't say that in front of your own kid who's your apprentice and you don't teach magic. Seriously, he can only do one thing. He can do a transformation, and he doesn't even use that in anything that's essential because he's never given any opportunities to use magic in an essential way. It just felt like a missed opportunity for me. It's more of a nitpick, and I can get used to that because, again, he's one of my favorite characters, and kid characters are so great in Studio Ghibli movies because you really get to feel the excitement and wonder along with them. Now, as for the themes of Howl's Moving Castle, it focuses a little less on the destruction of nature and focuses a little bit more on the negative consequences that come with participating in war, especially from Howl's perspective, because on one hand, he absolutely hates being in combat with other people, not just because he finds it immoral, but because the physical transformations are taking a really deep toll on him. But the possible solutions for evading the war and evading being a soldier are just as, if not even a little bit more complicated. Do you run away and hide being a complete and total coward, or do you fight both sides of the war physically at the risk of figuratively or literally becoming a monster just like the monsters you're trying to fight against? And at the same time, even if he doesn't fight alongside in the war, it doesn't serve his country, there is that possible risk of the country looking completely defenseless and having the possibility of being invaded, of the possibility of so many more innocent lives being killed. There are so many tough choices and no real easy answers, and not only does it serve the themes nicely, but it's also the main reason I actually found the conflict between Howl and Sophie's romance completely genuine. It's clear as day that they both love each other, but Howl knows for a fact he's done some shitty stuff as per this war, and he doesn't want to bombard Sophie with this risk of running away and hiding forever, even though she says, "I love you, I can take it, I know you've done some bad stuff, but I have seen your good side, and I appreciate that enough that I don't care about the flaws." It's very forgiving. It looks at people who have done really horrible things and say, "I can look past that if you stop, if you can improve as a person." And that's the other great thing about this movie. Characters who you associate as being evil or selfish are completely capable of changing and being compassionate. There are even some sides where the Wicked Witch of the Waste, who cursed Sophie with this to begin with, just based on the fact that Howl took her on a date to walk on air, and that's the only reason. They do show some sympathetic sides to her, especially when she's stripped of her magic and all she has are these faded memories of what it was like to be with Howl in the short time that she had. Now, that being said, towards the last third of the movie, it becomes a little unfocused on whether it wants to solely continue the arc about Howl trying to evade the war while also having his relationship with Sophie, which is being interfered with by the Witch of the Waste once she randomly tags along with them at one point, and also focusing a little bit on how Calcifer and Howl are bound together. And all those arcs are really interesting. Like the initial relationship between Calcifer and Howl is portrayed in a really good flashback, but each plot thread feels incredibly uneven with what we see on screen, and they try to make up for it by adding way too much exposition, especially with Blythe Danner. Her character is really just an exposition vessel, which is a little weird because at one point she actually does become the main villain, and she's not even all that interesting to watch. She's very bland in her line delivery to match the character design, but if that's the case, it was a bland and boring character to begin with. But outside of that, that's really about it. Howl's Moving Castle might actually be one of my favorite Miyazaki movies. I love the imaginative environment and atmosphere. The animation is some of his absolute best. I definitely think I would have picked this to be best animated feature over, I think it was Wallace and Gromit that year. It might have been. Nevertheless, though, imagination check. Great atmosphere check. Beautiful, bright animation check. Great voice acting. Some of Joe Hisashi's greatest music. I keep saying that over and over again, but he knows how to make something sound enchanting while also melancholic at the exact same time. And for all those reasons, I don't think I've said this since My Neighbor Totoro, but I'm going to give Howl's Moving Castle a 4.5 out of 5. Feels really good to say that again. Guys, thanks as always for watching. If you have seen Howl's Moving Castle, let me know in the comments below what you thought of it. Be sure to stay tuned for more Studio Ghibli reviews, and be sure to like and subscribe. Take care.